People love to buy into stories. I mean, it's huge. People want to support. I think that we all have an innate um, feature in ourselves to support others. Especially when a friend opens up a business. I mean, you want to be there and you want to help as much as you can. So I think if you can help share your story, people are gonna naturally buy in.
Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary. Welcome to this episode of the Hidden City Podcast. Today we have with us Paul Torres, who is the founder of Sobremesa Studios. It's a branding and content strategy studio here in Dallas, Texas. Paul's a member here at Waxbase and a good friend. And welcome to the show, Paul. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. Sobremesa Studios. What does that mean? We'd love to know kind of the name behind the meaning.
Yeah, so sobremesa is a word in Spanish, and it's funny because it kind of means, depending on where you're from, it can mean something slightly different, but essentially sobremesa is a moment where you're just like at a table and you're talking, kind of like right now.
Wait, this is a sobremesa moment?
This is kind of a sobremesa moment.
Okay,
so for a lot of people, it literally means like over the table. It could be like you're having dessert, people have like a drink at the end of the night. But for me, it always meant, you're eating with people, you're having a good time, and the conversation just continues.
Nice.
And you're like, you don't even think about getting up. Like, you're like, I'm going to kind of sit here in this moment. You're really content with what you're doing. You're really content with the people who are here. You're having a great time.
Oh, that's a great image. I love that. Yeah. It's a very specific feeling, but I think it's one that we've all had at different times. Do you have a favorite place that you have Sobremesa moments in your mind? Are there a place that you think of immediately?
Yeah, 100%. Growing up, and it's funny that you said that first, Lee. To me, sobremesa, I use that word because that feeling, that's the only word I know that describes that feeling. Mm-hmm. But I love it because you don't need to be Hispanic or no Spanish because we've all kind of experienced it. So I love it. And for me, personally, it was always at my aunt's house. Nice. We would go over. All of my family lives back home in Monterrey, Mexico. But it's me and my immediate family, and then I have an aunt that lived really close to us in Plano, where I grew up, and we would go over all the time. And as a kid, when hanging out with family is less cool, you kind of dread it a little bit. Yeah. But now I'm really thankful for those moments because we just be there for hours. You go in early morning and the sun is down. Yeah, and you've been there all day and you've had conversation and it was amazing. So when I think of Sobremesa, I kind of think back to those moments.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sobremesa moments. What comes to mind for us?
For us? Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I think of like moments probably with our family up in Indiana or in Ohio, just sitting around a table. I think of Ohio. Yeah. Our dad's parents grew up they lived in this very small town in Ohio, like 300 people.
Came from Slovakia, like just a small town.
And we would sit at this little baby table and play dominoes after dinner. And we would sit there as kids. Yeah. I mean, for hours and hours. Yeah. And that's
one of those moments.
Moment, maybe.
Around the table. No, that's awesome. Oh, I love the name. Do you think so? Connecting that, how did you obviously branded and named the studio? Tell us about the studio. Like, what kind of work do you do, and then how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like I have what feels to me like the coolest job because it doesn't feel real most of the time. I get to partner with small businesses. A lot of what I do. You mentioned branding and content. For me, I help people in digital spaces, mostly social media. And that might look like photography, videography, content creation. And for me, when I think of that, I chose branding and content because for me, branding is all about who you are, and content is all about what you're saying. So I think there are a lot of people who enter. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of small businesses, and a lot of the time, there's just so many parts to owning a small business that that's the last thing you think about.
Yeah.
So being able to come in and just help those people and give a little bit direction of like, hey, here's how you sort of establish your online presence. That's kind of what it's all about. So yeah, I get to work with, most of it is food and hospitality. I'd say that's a big stretch. But
and co-working.
And co-working, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Can you share some of the brands that you get to work with?
Yeah, so right now, one of my, well, I'm not going to say it, no favorites, no bias here.
Yeah.
But Starship Bagel,
shout out. Amazing.
This is going to be like
Starship
a podcast
Bagel.
of shout-outs.
Oh,
Dude, I love it. That's what we're about.
Yeah, Starship Bagel, there's Mexican restaurant Jose, obviously here at the Wax Space.
Yes, there you go.
Oak Cliff Brewing, shout out. But even a lot of, I'd say a lot of the people I work with are like one-off single-person entrepreneurs. Anyone from like someone who's starting off a little coffee cart to people who make cookies and people who, and I get a lot of the time people who reach out are like, hey, I'm starting a business and I have no clue where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ceramicist, I got to work with Corey Pakta, trade a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just really fortunate to work with a lot of these people.
You get to become a kind of a guide a little bit in their process, because I do think the small entrepreneur and small and medium, it's like they kind of have an idea of some of the stuff they want to do, but that is one of those things that content creation, branding, all of that, it's just like, what do we do sometimes? So I feel like that you do a good job of being a guide in that a bit too.
It can be really overwhelming for some businesses. So I mean, and it kind of spans from people who are like, please, like, walk me through every step of the way, and others who are like, I don't even want to think about social media. Like, here you go.
Yeah.
I'm just like, thank you.
Yeah. I love that you're willing to do both, too.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, depending on how this person wants to operate, I'm willing to jump in with them and figure it out.
Yeah, and that's come with time. I think just figuring out what works best with people.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, all of us are different, and we all approach businesses differently. So, just kind of seeing how someone wants to go about things and
what's
making the best out of it.
bit,
Kind of what's the vibe, what's the approach.
I feel like I can speak at least on Wax Space's like approach on this. When we were reaching out to you, I think Grant and I, you're laughing maybe a little bit, but I remember we were like, okay, we need to do more reels, and we need to do like kind of more of the how do I say?
Choose your words carefully.
I know. More engaging content. And I'm like, I want it to be beautiful. And there was this like little bit of a balance that came in the form of Sobremesa Paul, who was listening to both of those things. And we were like, man, he's got the quality, he's got like the skill, but also is like willing and in doing the like kind of like the quicker whatever it is of that time that sometimes is not like, I don't know. It can be uncomfortable, I think. And so I feel like our social media for Wax Space and the brewery, and you've even helped out with some 15, 17 stuff. Like, I feel like all of that stuff has been awesome, man.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like you've really helped us hone our voice and our look in a way that I wasn't anticipating. I think, and I think you emphasize that sort of authentic voice with people, because what you're ultimately saying is like, there's people behind these brands. And that's the real thing that you can kind of pull out in something like social media.
This is just a commercial for. I know this episode is brought to you by Sobremesa. No, we're huge fans.
I mean, I think on that point, I'd be curious to hear about more like, how do you pull that out of a business? How do you start to kind of uncover the unique parts of a business that kind of make it tick as the person coming alongside the business? Because like you said, so often these entrepreneurs are like knee deep in whatever, and they really aren't spending much time thinking about the story.
For sure.
But you seem to be able to come along and kind of help them figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of sitting and watching. Sitting and watching and seeing how the business, I mean, what's it about, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, what's it about? What do you want people to know about you? A lot of the times when I walk in, say it's like my first time ever, I mean, I just sit there and I watch and I see what
Observe.
what are the things that pop out. Even then, like what really makes something unique, you know. So say it's like a restaurant. Yeah, I'm sitting there. I want to see it all operate, and it's just fun. For me, it's mostly partly the fascination of just like how everything sort of operates.
Yeah.
But too, even when you're talking about that and like how does that translate to like social media, it's funny because right now I think a lot of people kind of wrestle between like how do we create authentic and engaging content or like how do we become viral?
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it's like
we don't always want to do dances at the co-working space.
Right.
Doug refused to do it.
I'm not gonna do it.
I'm not doing the dance. Yeah. So it's sort
It's a
of
balance,
like it's a balance. I think at the end of the day too, like we're all businesses, so like it's between storytelling and selling.
Sure.
You know, it has
I remember
to be.
those early conversations. You
Right.
talking about that. Yeah.
Right. It sort of has to be, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like finding what are the sweet spots, what are the middle grounds, and how can we sort of like thrive in that space. And normally, like more often than not, something will sort of like it'll guide itself into like one of those directions. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you start to notice the natural pathways as you go.
Yeah, for sure.
I do feel like the the story side, if you can nail the story side, then the selling will in some ways take care of itself. I mean, it's like, if you're just telling a great story, people will get captivated by that.
People love to buy into stories.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
People want to support, I think that we all have an innate like feature in ourselves to support others, especially, when a friend opens up a business, I mean, you want to be there and you want to help as much as you can. So I think if you can help share your story, people are going to naturally buy in.
Yeah. And I think the story side is tied to like the human kind of like aspect where it's like, it is this person or like, and not to say, I mean, Oak Cliff bread. I always think of Tyler when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go grab some this or I'm at the store. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna grab some sourdough from him. And it's, you want to support the local, but it's like you also know the people, and so I think that's the storytelling side of like Sobremesa is like, hey, at Jose as well, I'm now getting to know the chef, or I'm seeing like some of the people and the stuff that's happening behind this restaurant. I feel like you did a really good job of that. So I have to ask, Starship Bagel, tell us about the New York City trip.
Starship Bagel, Bagel Fest.
Yes. Okay.
Like the craziest event. Because I'm like, how do thousands of people travel? Some traveling from like across the world.
Okay.
Meet up for like bagels. But I think I tell people like, thankfully, this job has gotten me to a point where I know a lot about really specific things. Coffee, bagels, mostly food related. And talking to Oren, the owner of Starship Bagel, has been really enlightening because if you get to know him, I think a lot of people at face value, something like Starship Bagel can be sort of, I don't know what the right term is, but let's say like something just at face value. It's bagel, it's bread.
Yeah.
But for him, it's more of like a cultural thing, what he grew up with, and what it means for him as a Jewish man, and to be able to like present that, because they don't do bacon, egg, and cheese. They don't do their kosher menu, things like that. But it's cool to see him sort of navigate that, and for Starship Bagel to gain national attention, international attention, which is crazy. So back to Bagel Fest is it's like the top, and I say top with quotes. Yeah. Top bagel places from around the country, and I think this last year places 2 shops from Portugal. I believe were there.
Okay. So they travel in to show off the bagels.
They show off the bagels, and they all come with like crazy flavors. I've never heard of. The craziest one was like a kimchi schmear on the cacio e pepe bagel.
Cacio e pepe bagel.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much bread. I've never had this much bread in my life.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You go for
the flavors. That's crazy.
All the flavors, and I mean, people are celebrating. You're taking pictures with like giant inflatable bagels.
Yeah, it's a party. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's such a party, and it's really quick, but I mean, I think it's such a cool niche thing, because it's like a celebration of like, hey, we all make this brown bread. Bagels. Yeah, we all make bagels, but it's amazing. Yeah, and luckily, my wife and I this is our second year we've gone.
Okay.
Last year they did win Best Bagel.
Okay. That's crazy.
Which is huge. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is huge.
I mean, this is an international competition, essentially.
Essentially,
right?
yeah. And it was interesting because leading up to this one, I mean, there were articles coming out in Tokyo about it. There were articles coming out in Europe about it.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we were all like in a group chat. Yeah, like, hey, do you see this article? It's like, we can't read it. It's in Japanese, but, but we see our picture there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so it was really cool. Yeah, I love those kind of things. Any celebration of something that's like really specific but can mean a lot to those people is really cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I used to live right across the street from the Starship Bagel downtown, and I would always look out my window to see how long the line was, and if it wasn't too long, I'd like run down there and get my bagel. So
I love
it's a great brand, and you've developed it in a cool way.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I feel like you're getting to see other people's creative process too as you kind of like work on yours.
For sure.
I mean, even that in bagels, like hearing kimchi schmear, like you're seeing people create stuff and take like risks and opportunities. How does that inform your creative process? And then also, what would you describe kind of your process right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Luckily, I think Starship is a perfect example because. So I've been with them for, I want to say 3 years now.
Wow.
And Sobremesa is going on 5 years.
Nice.
Granted, it wasn't always Sobremesa. It's like 1 year Sobremesa. The last few years as Paul Arturo Torres Creative, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
Yeah.
You know. But I bring that up because a lot of the things, they're a perfect client to highlight just kind of how this is all started, which is really like, I mean, I feel so blessed and fortunate. It's all been like word of mouth.
Cool.
I mean, I met Oren at a coffee shop here in Oak Cliff.
Yeah.
He walked in and the guy working at the coffee shop sort of pointed at me and goes, "Oh, there he is." And I was like, "Me? Like what?" And he's like, and Oren's just like, "Hey, like I love your work. Let's talk. Let's chat." Nice. And I took him up on it, and like together we sort of formed our creative processes by figuring out like a lot of trial and error and just getting to work. I think for me what's really important and why I love being in small business and sort of the small business realm is I get to work really closely with like owners and people who've sort of drafted up the vision of the business, helps me. I mean, it's a lot of like bouncing back and forth because I get to see people just like whip up this dream and it just being there and sort of documenting that process, I think for me is really important. So as far as the strategy and how I approach things, I think it's just like documenting as much as I can and having fun with it. And then also keeping my ear to the ground when it comes to like what's going on in the social media space and sort of saying maybe not how do we take this business and squeeze into social media, but more the opposite. How do we take social media and like move it into the business? You know?
Oh, I imagine that's a never-ending like struggle because it seems like it's always changing
all the time.
How do you take those changes? I like what you just said there. Like, hey, we're gonna take the business first and then see kind of how that can be applied to social media. How do you continue to like, what does that practically look like as you're thinking through it with business owners, and how do you decide what, not trend to chase, but how do you kind of decide what kind of thing you might try that's a little different versus what you've kind of always normally done?
For sure. I think for me right now, it's sort of like, it's fun to experiment with things like trends. Yeah. As long as, for me, I think the non-negotiable is that the business stays true to who they are. Mm-hmm. We mentioned like dancing, like co-working space dance. Like, I feel like it's cool, it's trendy, right? It would catch a lot of people. Then I'd be like, well, what's this about? What's Wax Speedo? Like,
why are Doug and Grant dancing?
Right.
Yeah. I couldn't, Doug, if we do that.
Horrible. So
We're closing it down.
It's not, we're closing it down.
But yeah, so it's a lot of experimenting, but also finding a way to share the messages of the brand without message fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now, like, it's so easy to get message fatigue. And, you know, everyone talks about algorithms. They talk about what's the best strategy, what's the best time to post. And I think a lot of that, like, it's things to take into account. But I think once you, as a business, can sort of establish your core audience, a lot of that stuff starts to matter a little less and less.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with time, I think that's the other thing, like just being patient with it. I found that, I think when I started, there's a lot of frustration of just like, man, this isn't viral. You know, this real, I think got 10,000 likes.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, well, over the span of X amount of years, like, to see the growth in all of these accounts and the engagement. And I mean, the biggest compliment to me in the world is like when someone finds a business and they go, oh, your Instagram was really cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I try not to let too many people, like, from the viewpoint of the business. I don't want anyone to know it's me, you know, but it is cool. Like, I'm in the background, like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
How I mean, expectations got to be something to get figured out with all this because, like you said, someone's like, oh, I want 10,000 likes on this post or whatever. How do you manage those expectations when thinking through all it? Because it's social media is such a, I don't know, feels Wild Westy of sorts. Like, you don't really know what you can get sometimes.
You don't really know. Well, and then the other thing too, and because a lot of the people I work with sell a product more often than not, or a service, I tell people, I think it's more about the slow burn. And what I mean by the slow burn is like, I think it's awesome. Like, it'd be amazing if you got 1 million followers. Cool. But also, I would rather someone have 10 followers that actually engage with them, say support their business, than 1 million followers who just view your stuff and move on to the next thing. So I think it's sort of like talking through those things and being like, no, let's try to find strategies that connect you with people who can tangibly interact with you as well. And I think once you do that, the people on the outside, right, those who are a little further out of reach will also just sort of naturally stick on.
That's got to take a lot of discipline. I love that because on one hand, you look at an Instagram account, and one of the first things any of us all always do is like, oh, they've got X amount of followers. You know, it's a signal.
Right.
How important they are.
Credibility or their importance. But I love that you're like, no, the thing that the business should focus on is, hey, do I have people engaging with me? Do I have a core audience that I'm talking to? And if I do, then great. Mission accomplished.
Amazing.
I hear this when you talk 15, 17 audience stuff too, where it's like,
for sure.
and some of that's, I mean, through email as well, I would say. But it's that focusing on who's that audience that is tuned into what you're.
Exactly. Yeah, like even I'm thinking like Wax Space, like best work club in Oakland.
There we go. There we go.
We didn't pay him to say it.
Didn't pay to say that. But I mean, like, I think what's helped a lot is just like really driving home the fact that like it's Oak Cliff, it's the Oak Cliff neighborhood, your neighborhood work club. Because I mean, it would be awesome if we got 1 million followers from outside the country, but none of them would ever visit.
Yeah. They wouldn't be coming.
Until we launch our virtual membership.
Oh God.
Virtual member.
You can just put on the VR, Apple Vision and you can join us.
Be inside of Wax Space at all times.
Dude, there's a way.
Desk
I'm just
POV.
kidding. Oh yeah.
That's too funny. Well, Paul, you interact with a lot of brands. When you think about your own business, because you're a small business owner just as well.
Yeah.
How do you find time to kind of recharge? What do you do to like make sure that your own creativity is being cultivated? Because I imagine you're pouring so much of yourself into all these brands. It's got to be hard to like, maintain that creativity for yourself.
Yeah, for me, it's all about, at the end of the day, finding a space to be creative that has nothing to do with like photography and videography and stuff. this is a two-part answer. So part one is like right now I try to separate myself from that. It used to be my creative outlet, right? And now that's kind of become work. I try to do like other things, right? Mm-hmm. So right now, this is gonna sound crazy. I picked up a new hobby, which is like sausage making, right?
Really?
Like I know out of all things, I was like, I just want to like be creative in a way and do something that awesome. I've never done before, right? Really like makes my brain work.
Yes,
right?
Yes. You and Eric Nystrom.
You got to talk to
Eric. I know.
Eric comes up on this podcast.
I know. I need to talk to him about it. We'll just start a sausage podcast.
Yeah. No, that's his like ultimate dream is Elmwood
wait,
Sausage
that's so
Co.
cool. Okay, so how did you even come to this idea of sausage making?
So it actually has to do with one of the big drivers of Sobremesa is actually like just food and culinary. To me, it's always been such a fascination. So I was just like, what are some cool things? I think it actually, granted, was inspired by someone on social media. Yeah. It was like, hey, this is like an easy thing. I mean, I did the sourdough bread. You know, I was in the pandemic making the sourdough bread. I made kombucha. I pickle stuff. Nice. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a cool thing. So it's that. Like it's cool. A good creative outlet. It's fun.
Have you been like kind of trying out different recipes or ingredients to throw into those, or is it? Because I've heard Eric before. He's like, oh, I throw in these herbs or I do this.
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
You know, I'm very much like, okay, step one.
Yeah. Like, how to make.
Step one, how to make
that's
it.
Awesome.
So that's been a fun creative outlet. And then the part two about like recharging is, I think because I started really just like by myself, you know. I started out of curiosity by asking questions, by a lot of people being kind enough to sort of show me the ropes. Just that curiosity, I'm still fortunate that it still carries on. Mm-hmm. You know, I started photography back in 2019, I want to say. Yeah, 2019. Just because I asked a friend who was a photographer at the time. I was like, hey, like, can I like shadow you? I don't know what I'm doing. I had this like Canon 60D, you know.
60D?
Yeah,
that's great.
Shout out to 60D. And I went with her. She did like a family shoot outside, and I was like, she's like, oh, press this, and that. Grant, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't even know what the dials did.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this image I'm seeing is like the best image I've ever created, right? Yeah. Right. So you know, take some photos. At the end of that session, she goes, all right, just keep doing that. And I was like, do what? Like, I didn't really learn anything. All I know is, like, I just followed what you said. And she's like, just keep taking photos. Nice. You'll figure it out. Like,
that's awesome.
And so I could tell you pretty confidently that from, like, April of 2019 to about, like, November of 2023, I photographed every day for at least an hour or two. Like every single day.
You can tell. Yeah, it's been fun to watch because I feel like photography is one of those things where it's the more you do, the better you get at it. Yeah. And I think, it's just, it's awesome. And that was one of the things that definitely attracted us to working with you was like you're skilled at it, man. It's awesome.
There's something to be said about that for most things. Like you put in, it's kind of that cliche of like put in the 10,000 hours or whatever to become the expert. Yeah. But it really is true. Like if you just commit to like, hey, I'm just going to do this no matter what for an hour every day.
An hour a day. That's good.
It compounds over the course of 4 years. I mean, yeah.
And I think keeping that up and really being disciplined about it, it's really tricky, especially at first because when I started, everyone around me had 7 years on me. Yeah. And I was like, so I'm comparing my brand new self to like people who have got years of experience. So it's really easy to get like disheartened.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and now a few years down the line, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is like, I'm so thankful to myself for like kind of listening into that. Mm-hmm. And just taking that and running with it. So
it's kind of surprising. 2019 is when you started?
2019.
That's awesome. That surprises me, Paul. It feels like you've been shooting a while.
You've got 20 years of experience already.
Yeah, that's awesome. Paul, we're talking a ton about brands, and I feel like one of the things you do so well is you have such good you have good taste. Like I think there's a lot of brands that are out there, some that are more mature than others, some that are just like a deer, just like trying to figure out how to walk. But what, as people are like starting to appreciate maybe brands more and more, what are some of your favorites that come to mind that just like, are inspiring or that you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I love, right now, some of my favorite brands have to do with, like home and home aesthetics, right? Or, the first one that pops to mind is actually like a signage brand, so like George and Willie.
Yeah,
right?
they're
like
great.
George and Willie stuff. Just like, I mean, I love coffee, so like La Marzocco is always gonna like be
classic,
really near and dear, right? Yeah, like my goal is to get like the Linea Mini one day.
Yeah, don't we all want that?
Like
I know.
$7,000 home machine.
Grant and I keep talking about like, hey, how do we get one of those in the office at one point, and then we launch a podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
But yeah, just I mean, PF Candles.
That's right.
Yeah.
PF Candles is great.
Right. I mean, there's like a million coffee shop brands. We were all talking about Onyx Coffee.
Yeah.
You know, local brands. I mean, I love what Tyler Street, right? Is it Tyler Mercantile?
Oh yeah, Tyler Street Mercantile, I think. Right? Is it?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. What is it?
They're off of
Tyler Kingston.
That's
Tyler Kingston.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Savannah for that.
Yeah, shout out for the
Nice
save. Yeah, thank you for the save. Like Shop on Bishop, they sell like really cool like little Western things. Yeah. I mean, I love anything that's like. My wife and I used to think that we were minimalist. We came to the like harsh realization that we're like totally maximalist. Like
Paul,
our house is like filled with like a million trinkets.
Yeah. Minimalism's overrated at this point.
Honestly,
it had its moment. It was awesome.
It's kind of boring.
Dude, there's no personality. It's speaking of, I mean, we're gonna riff on this for a second, but. The greatest example right now of just horrific minimalism is the Jaguar rebrand. Have you been seeing that?
Yeah.
Dude, right? I mean, there was an actual Jaguar jumping out, and now it's like just this J. It's like, all right, I know. So
the way it was presented, I was like, I mean, shout out to them for
they've tried something.
Right,
I'm always gonna respect someone for like making something different, or because cars all kind of look the same, and like they went for that, so I respect that.
Yeah,
but
it just didn't connect with me.
No, nor with me.
Yeah,
not the maximalists. It did not hit that market. So.
Yeah. No, I love when brands go like all out. To the max.
Yeah,
let's dial it up to like 11.
Yeah, that went up to 11. What are you laughing about?
I'm just loving listening to you guys talk about this. The only like sort of way I can relate to what you're talking about is sitting in a Tesla the other day. And I was like, there is just nothing in here. And I do not like the look and feel of this at all. It's way too clean.
Yeah.
What were you doing sitting in a Tesla?
I don't remember. Who knows? It's unimportant, but...
Yeah. Or like even to like shout out a local brand is like David Street Espresso.
That's awesome.
You know? I love... The reason why I love them so much is because it's like... The wood feels a little old, and I mean that in the best way. You know, like it's all really clean, but it's clean in the sense of like, you know, it's not dirty, but it doesn't look like the clean white coffee shop.
It's not new. Like it's we're gonna go on another riff.
Let's go.
Like the whole wabi sabi kind of like old and warm textures or worn down kind of like there's a value to that. I think that's kind of like maximalism is a push against that minimalist. I think that like aesthetic you're talking about at David Street Espresso is very much a push against the like ultra like modern clean minimalist vibe, and I so much like that other version more.
For sure. So, and I think even right now, this will like jump into like a whole new thing. But I think in Dallas, we're seeing so many businesses, and nothing against them, but like you can tell that they're just like very clean. They kind of come from like a template, you know. So that you're seeing a lot of like similar concept, just different names. So whenever a place can like stand out and go against that grain, I'm all for it.
Yeah. It has a little bit of a personality. I think is kind of not a forced personality. I guess.
I mean like local hero for it, Jimmy's Food Store.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
Jimmy's Food Store, and
iconic.
You're like, iconic. You know, but you're like, it's not the clean, white, bright place.
It's got character.
Yeah.
Part of that's just time too. I think you're right about some of that. Where it's like if it is new, it's hard to develop that look and feel of Jimmy's, where Jimmy's just been there for
it's
so long.
It's a commitment for time,
But I love it. I love what you're talking about. This is fun.
It's fun.
So Paul, let's rewind back to you grew up in Monterrey, or you were at least born there.
Yeah.
How did you make your way to Oak Cliff? Tell us the story.
Yeah, so was born in Monterrey, Mexico. Moved at a really young age, so I was 3, and settled in Plano, of all places. My parents, I think, just followed an aunt of mine.
Okay,
nice.
You know,
Cool.
so it's like, hey, come to Plano. So I find myself in East Plano. You know, shout out East Plano.
There we go.
There you go.
But growing up in Plano was really interesting because I think a lot of people know it for the west side of Plano, which is, you know, like really high class, highbrow. And not to say that my side wasn't, but, you know, it was called the historic side, you know, which usually means like, it's a little underkept, you know. But I loved it because growing up, like my parents, you know, we moved here in 2000. So, and like to this day, like their English is fine, but like they never really had to like excel at it because that neighborhood we found ourselves in was like primarily like Hispanic people who had like just moved here. Going to school, like most of my classes, my elementary school offered like full Spanish classes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I did most of my elementary school in Spanish. It wasn't until like middle school that I did like ESL in middle school for like a day, but yeah, it's just like it's crazy to me that stuff like existed in Plano. Very thankful for it, actually.
Yeah.
But I found myself in Oak Cliff, which is funny because like growing up, especially like from the Plano standpoint, Oak Cliff is like the dangerous. Like
don't go there.
Don't go there. Don't go to South Dallas or like the gasp. Like you went to Oak Cliff.
Oak Cliff.
Yeah. But I just like for me, actually, it's funny. I came to Oak Cliff for the first time because I won a giveaway from an influencer.
No way.
Yeah. And the pickup
social.
was in Oak Cliff.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Over at Oak Cliff Coffee Roasters.
Nice.
And yeah, she was like, yeah, Oak Cliff. And I was like, I guess I'm going to Oak Cliff for the first time.
That's funny.
And I found myself there and like I ended up walking throughout that neighborhood because I just didn't know where Davis Street was at the time. Well, so I was like walking around and it made me really think back to the neighborhood in Plano that I grew up in. And I think to this day, the reason why I love Oak Cliff so much is because it sort of has that same feel. I tell you, like, I feel I don't want to bash on Plano. Yeah, I don't want to bash on Plano, but in Plano,
you can bash on Plano if you
want. The other parts of Plano were very much, I don't know, everything didn't feel as like neighborhood oriented.
Yeah,
like I didn't feel like, oh, this is somewhere that I want to belong. Necessarily.
Kind of like Richardson, right? No, I'm just kidding. We also bash on Richardson.
No, it's always Richardson. It's the butt of all the jokes.
Yeah, I know.
Well, coming into like that part of Plano where my parents still live there, and like this part of Oak Cliff, and there's like little pockets where I'm like, this is somewhere that, you know, now that I'm like married and considering like putting down some roots, it's like these are places that we could imagine ourselves like belonging, you know, and I've always fortunately, a lot of Sobremesa wouldn't have happened without Oak Cliff, actually. I came to I used to be the shyest kid in the world. Like, I'm talking like extrovert to a million percent, or introvert, excuse me. And a few creatives here in Oak Cliff started like some meet and greets. This is like pre-pandemic.
Oh, cool.
And had I not like forced myself also to like come out here for those things, yeah, I don't think any of this would have ever happened.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I mean, like Oak Cliff definitely is a huge part of the story, and even now, like some of the brands I've worked with here in Oak Cliff, I've had the opportunity to interact with the community, and I think it's one place that like, as I consider even the future of Sobremesa is like I want to figure out like what's a good way to uplift like part of the Oak Cliff community.
That's awesome. Keep putting your roots down, Paul. I love that. What were some of those creative meetups? I'm so curious.
Yeah,
just like from my own information.
Yeah, so there's a few, and to give like a few shout outs.
Yeah.
One of them, her name is Cynthia.
Okay.
Her and like a few other people, like I still think of like Elba, Maria. So they were like local creatives. Each one of them like worked at like ad agencies
cool.
Cynthia's like a local photographer here in Oak Cliff. They've put together something, and I'm assuming they're the purpose is just like, hey, there's nothing really for creatives, so let's like all meet up. And through social media, I think I just like caught wind of it.
Cool.
And I like drove all the way out there, and I sat in the parking lot like, I could leave. I could leave right now. I could go back home, but I was like, no, we're gonna do it.
Way to go!
Yeah. I just and went and like talked to them, and it's like so cool to see so many creative people interacting and engaging together. So yeah, it was awesome. Like it was really cool. The other one was there was a meetup. There used to be a space. It is now a Mexican natural wine store. It used to be cold soda.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah,
yes.
And the studio was across the street, like their studio, and up there they were like on the second or third floor. Well, they had like clay makers and and like photographers and things like that. So going up there, I was just like, wow, there's all these people who are doing these things like as a career. Like this is something that should be like can be achievable because I never thought it would necessarily be achievable. Yeah, so it's just like
that's
all
awesome.
of those things put together.
Just little movements like that happening.
Yeah, sort of the sparks.
Nice.
I love it, Paul. Well, we love that you're here in Oak Cliff. I had one more question for Paul. What advice would you give to a small business that is kind of looking to tell their story effectively in kind of today's landscape? What would you... I feel like this whole podcast is sort of good advice. There's a lot of good advice in here, but what would you say to someone who's starting a small business and wants to tell their story?
Yeah, it sounds kind of basic, but I'm like, share your story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like don't try to be something else that you're not. Don't try to be this big brand. Like be you, be your story. If you sell a product, like talk about your product. Talk about how you landed there. You know, find those connection points. And I think people, you know, we mentioned before, people want to connect with you. So, you know, you're gonna find your people. So share who you are, share what you do, and share the day to day. And over time, it will amass to something that tells a story. You know,
That's awesome. That's good advice. Well, Paul, thanks for being on here. How can people reach out to you or follow you? And while you're going to answer that, we have to show those cookies. I'm remembering, these you just showed up with these on the episode, and they are gorgeous. They're like
my little picnic basket.
Yes, yeah, it's great.
Shout out to my wife for the basket.
I love the
nice.
basket.
Yeah, got Sobremesa cookies. Yeah. It's awesome with the logo.
Cookies.
That's
so
hilarious.
And
it's
they taste
awesome.
great too.
It tastes
they're amazing.
Great.
Shout out to Cookies by Krista.
There we go. That's so fun. But yeah, how can people connect with you or follow along what you're doing?
People can go to my website, sobremesastudios.com, Instagram at sobremesa_studios, and me at Paul Arturo Torres.
Awesome. Thanks for being on, man.
Thanks for coming on, Paul.
Thanks, you guys.
Great to see you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, and thanks so much for tuning in.